You're looking forward to a busy day on the Hill and a great finish to the Manufacturing Summit, so I need just a little bit better good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, I may not be Eric Cantor, but I am happy to get a 10 o'clock call from Jay Timmons any day of the week. And I commute back and forth to Delaware. I have 3 young children in Delaware, so it was a very unusual event that I happened to be staying over last night. I was to be right now at a prayer breakfast with Senator John Cornyn. Maybe that tells you one good thing to start the day off. I was to be at a prayer breakfast with Senator John Cornyn this morning. There are moments of bipartisanship. There are places and times when we can and do come together. And if there is one simple overarching message I wanted to give you this morning, it was, don't give up on us. Don't accept from the folks who work for you, the Congress of the United States, that we just can't get things done. This is a hard morning in some ways. Virginia's loss is America's loss. The lack of clarity about the path forward out of that primary, I think, does set us back in some ways in terms of encouraging those who are willing to have a conversation about reaching across the aisle. But there are other places in other states where the outcomes yesterday, I think, are encouraging. I'll just for a moment say, and forgive me for going wildly off, I don't have a script. Who am I kidding? Senator Lindsey Graham is the co-chair of the Manufacturing Caucus in the Senate. Senator Lindsey Graham has worked very hard to be an advocate for comprehensive immigration reform and to be an advocate for a wide range of things that are on that short list of the shared agenda of the manufacturers who are here today. And he won his primary yesterday by an overwhelming margin. So this message is not solely one of challenge and of division. It can also be one of opportunity and of progress, and it requires your voice more than anything else. Look, I spent 8 years as in-house counsel at a wonderful, innovative, creative manufacturing company in Delaware. It was an exciting period in my life. I loved going to work. Every one of our factories was a fully integrated facility where we had a shop floor, a manufacturing floor, right next to inventory, right next to research, right next to what few offices we had. And although my brother taunted me as overhead every time I walked in wearing a tie and being the lawyer that I am, as a trained chemist and someone who was deeply passionate about chemical manufacturing, I also saw the difference that manufacturing made in the lives of the folks who worked with us. And I believe you heard from my predecessor and fellow Delawarean, Joe Biden, yesterday, not just about American exceptionalism, but about manufacturing exceptionalism. Not just about the things that we can be proud of as a country, but that we can be proud of as passionate advocates for manufacturing as a sector that brings strength and hope and opportunity to American families and communities day in and day out. Look, one of the real bright spots of this recovery over the last couple of years has been the real beginnings of a renaissance in manufacturing. 600,000 new manufacturing jobs created in just the last 4 years when there had been significant loss previously and big gains in productivity. There's a lot of things moving in the right direction. There's just one thing that isn't: Congress. And so, yes, this is the depressing part of the show. We're going to emphasize how dysfunctional the place is. I welcome a chance to be back with you, and it was great to see Tiffany Adams and Dorothy Coleman and Jerry Hodges and Jay Timmons and Eric. I mean, everybody who I've enjoyed working with since returning to Washington now as a senator. In between 8 years in the private sector with a manufacturing company and being here, I spent 6 years as a county executive running a local government. Why did that help in any way? Because I had to do stuff. I had to build things. I had to deliver results on time. We had to balance our budget every year. I had to build sewers, right? I had to deliver public safety. I had to create a predictable business environment. We had to grow employment. And there really isn't a Republican or a Democratic way to fix your sewer system or to help make sure that the permitting process is predictable and fair and transparent and timely. And at the end of the day, that sent me here as one of, I think, the less partisan of my caucus. What are we doing then as a result? There are moments when I tear what's left of my hair out. There are moments when I wonder why I'm getting on the 6:25 a.m. train from Delaware. And there have been moments of just bracing partisanship and of teeth-grinding gridlock in my exactly 3 years, 6 months, and 27 days as a senator. And I often say when I'm home that every day in Delaware is better than any day in Washington. But one of the things that gives me hope and encouragement is just how strong Delaware is, just how good the people are, and just how passionate our small and medium manufacturers are, as well as some of the iconic manufacturers and NAM members like DuPont, that small little family business that's just getting into its third century. We have a great manufacturing sector and really strong manufacturing leaders in Delaware. And so that keeps me getting on the train every morning and working to see if I can catch 5 minutes with Pat Toomey on the train on the way down, or seeing if there's a way I can persuade Bob Menendez to be interested in working with me on something, reaching across the aisle, reaching throughout the caucus, week in and week out. One of the first things I did upon getting to Washington was to call on then-President John Engler. As you heard, I was active on the Public Affairs Steering Committee under Jerry Jasnowski for 8 years. And John Engler and I had a great conversation, and we began in a positive direction, but it was clear to me there was still a hesitancy about embracing a Democrat, let's just say. One of the things that I have really been impressed with about Jay Timmons is not just a striking and beautiful new headquarters, not just a great and energized staff, but his positive and open-hearted attitude, his real willingness to work with me. As I came over and said, look, I want to launch an initiative, Manufacturing Jobs for America. Because as I hear up and down my state, and I know other senators do in their states, what I hear is, let's bring manufacturing back. And let's get out of the way and help it move forward. So we sat down and pounded through a whole series of items and ideas and agenda issues where we looked at bills that had already been passed in the House. We looked at the strengths of some in my caucus, and we looked at the areas that were a focus, a priority for the NAM. And, you know, I think the results are genuinely positive. The Manufacturing Jobs for America campaign, in no small part, came about because of manufactured crises in the Capitol. I'm a member of the Budget Committee. I feel like that's a confession. Good morning, my name is Chris. I'm a member of the Budget Committee. The fiscal cliff, the government shutdown, all of this left me going home at night and meeting up with friends and neighbors in Delaware who'd say, we're so sorry you have to get up and go back there tomorrow. And why can't you all work together better? A place that has endless manufactured political crises doesn't give you a predictable pathway towards growth and doesn't give you the support and the energy and the resources to really make tough decisions and to decide to invest and grow in this country. So what's the Manufacturing Jobs for America campaign all about? We've now got 26 Democratic senators who've put on the table 34 different bills. And Jay referenced the sort of broad areas in terms of access to capital, skills and the workforce, access to export markets, and strategy. But a number of these bills, I must say, half of them at this point are bipartisan, and a half dozen of them have cleared committee, and 2 of them have been enacted through executive action. And I am confident, hopeful, that we can get more done with your insistent voice, that we not give up on legislating, which is, after all, what we get paid to do. Let me just briefly reference a couple of the areas that I think have shown real promise. So how important is the R&D tax credit? Gee, I don't know. The NAM trotted me out for 6 years in a row to come down and do exactly this and go do Hill visits and talk about how the R&D tax credit was absolutely essential to our company. And frankly, to complain about how complex it was and what terrible tax policy it was to allow it to expire and then refile and right? And to say, instead of the extender game, what I call the lobbyist full employment game, well, perhaps what we ought to do is just make it permanent. So what was my first bill as a senator? R&D tax credit permanency. Not exactly a crowd pleaser at home, but when I explain to people this is about supporting manufacturing and bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States, they love it. We actually have a president who supports permanency for the R&D tax credit. But we have a divided Congress that can't seem to get us there. So I've worked tirelessly 3 different ways with a number of really great Republican friends and partners. Senator Pat Roberts, Republican of Kansas. Senator Mike Enzi, Republican of Wyoming. We've worked on bills that make the R&D tax credit accessible to early-stage startups. We've worked on bills that allow it to be used as an offset against the AMT. And the IRS has now allowed amended return filers to use the alternative simplified credit. I know I'm getting into the weeds. But what's that do? It makes the R&D credit more broadly usable. It strengthens it and sustains it by bringing more companies into the conversation, into the mix. and by bringing more voices to the table, so this isn't just seen as a benefit to the handful of biggest companies, but is seen as a critical part of our long-term tax strategy to accelerating innovation. We've got Democrats who support strengthening the skills and the training of our workforce that might surprise you, and a willingness to work across the aisle to make that happen. So Dean Heller of Nevada, Republican senator, and Kay Hagan of North Carolina, Democratic senator, have a great NAM-endorsed bill, the America Works Act, which actually would help accelerate the delivery of meaningful private sector portable credentials for skills, that actually has made it out of the Help Committee and is part of a, I hope, hotline bill that will see passage this year, again, with your voice. That R&D tax credit expanding thing I just referenced, Mike Enzi and I, Senator Enzi of Wyoming, we got the Startup Innovation Credit included in tax extenders and voted out of Finance Committee on a voice vote, meaning unanimously. There is progress on things that matter to manufacturing. I've got a bill with Senator Mark Kirk, Republican of Illinois, called the American Manufacturing Competitiveness Act. 2 more cups of coffee and I could say that clearly. Why does this matter? We need a national manufacturing strategy, one that's clear, one that's coherent, one that's done annually, and one that's done in consultation with the private sector. Our competitors all have them. Does that mean we want the government to run manufacturing strategy? No. But to coordinate and to communicate and to make investments strategically in a way that will make a sustained difference for manufacturing. We've got a lot of co-sponsors. We've gotten it through the Commerce Committee. It's part of the Manufacturing Hubs bill. There is progress to be had. Look, folks, I could go on at great length, as you may have picked up. One of the things that was most painful to me in my experience in manufacturing was the loss of trade secrets. Manufacturing invests in R&D. Manufacturing innovates and invents and creates week in or week out. It's invent or die. And one of the most painful experiences I had was when 2 really trusted associates walked out the door with the secret sauce that made a particular product of ours the market leader for decades. And a distant competitor went from way back all the way around the field to being right up behind us in about 6 weeks. And we knew somebody had stolen us blind from our own trade secrets. And yet, it's the only area within the IP family where there's no private right of action. You have to go plead for the Department of Justice to pay attention to you. There were only 25 trade secret enforcement actions brought by the Department of Justice nationally last year. At a time when cyber thieves aren't knocking on the window or breaking in the back door, they are actually breaking through the firewalls morning, noon, and night. So Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, a seasoned senior Republican, joined with me in introducing the Defend Trade Secrets Act just this past week, and NAM members were good enough to come and testify at the hearing we've had. Look, the point I'm making is simply this. We don't agree on everything, Republicans and Democrats. Of course we don't. That's what it means to have 2 parties. That's what it means to have those 4 basic principles that unite Americans that Jay talked about in the introduction. But there are Democrats who are passionate about manufacturing, more than you might believe. And there are Democrats who understand that manufacturing is the key to the strength and vibrancy of America in the long term. And NAM is the organization that has been, is, and should be the voice to Congress of folks who make things for a living. Up and down my small state, when I wave around an iPhone and say we still invent things in this country, but we don't make them enough anymore, people of every partisan stripe and the majority of Delawareans who really aren't partisan start nodding their heads. And when I say, you know the thing that lets you do this on your iPhone, that was invented by 2 University of Delaware professors. They go, huh. And I say, but not one part of this thing is made in our country today. And that's putting us on the wrong track. We can regain not just our leadership, but our dominance in manufacturing. And that way lies opportunity for our families, for our country, for our communities. We need to pull together and make sure that we insist on elected officials who are more about principled compromise than they are about pulling us apart, who look at the Ex-Im Bank and say, could it be better? Could it be leaner? Could it be more functional? Yes. But should we kill it at a time when our competitors around the globe have dramatically stronger and better financed comparable engines? No, absolutely we should reauthorize Ex-Im. Do we have enough of a skilled workforce? Do you have wonderful, talented, skilled workers just banging down the door, eager to come work? Or do you have positions you can't fill today? We can and should come together on everything, from comprehensive immigration reform to training a skilled workforce to the 21st century, to protecting your inventions and innovations, to making sure we've got a path forward. I can't thank you enough for the unexpected blessing of the opportunity to be not at a prayer breakfast in the Capitol, but at a breakfast with people who do some of the most important work in our country. I won't accept a refusal to work across the aisle to advance American manufacturing, and I hope you won't either. I hope in the visits you made to the Hill yesterday, you were insistent and you heard some hope of progress, and I hope for those of you who have yet time today to go up and make your voice heard that you do so. I know this is hard. I know you're leaving companies behind. I know you've traveled from great distances, and I hope you know how much it matters that you get in there today and fight with us. Fight with the folks who care about manufacturing to make real progress for our country. Thank you, God bless you, and I appreciate the chance for a few questions. Am I wildly over time?
What's that? Yeah, you've got some time. So we have some time for questions, but I also know that there are some folks who have meetings on the Hill, and so I know the senator won't be offended if you need to leave. So Tiffany, I'll turn it over to you and your crew for questions.
The R&D tax credits for small businesses. As a small business owner, I think we need to have more of an incentive there for the smaller businesses.
That's right.
Because it's not a big number. When we looked at our tax credit this year, we kind of giggled. So is there any work being prepared in that area?
I'd rather have you giggle than sob, but let's get to a point where you smile. Let me see if I hear you right. You looked at the potential R&D tax credit you could claim, and it was laughably small. Is this because you are modestly profitable at this point, and the tax credit is only an offset against profitability? I don't mean to get into your shorts and, That's right. That's right. Yep. I'd love to, there is a policy paper on my website that summarizes it, coons.senate.gov. It's got a piece up there that describes, but we'd be happy to get to you the details. Both of the bills I referred to, with Mike Enzi of Wyoming and with Pat Roberts of Kansas, are designed to make that situation easier. So let me briefly walk through the one with Enzi, the Startup Innovation Credit. If you're not yet profitable, you can't claim the R&D credit at all right now, right? Because it's not tradable, it's not refundable. So the germ of the idea with Senator Enzi was to say, what do we want people to do? We want them to hire more. We want them to get through the valley of death and sort of early stage launch. And so we allowed the W-2 liability of a company, the amount of payroll tax you're owing, to be a ceiling and to claim the tax credit against that rather than saying if you're not profitable, you can't get any credit at all. This may not fit your exact situation. This is for pre-profitability. For the Roberts bill, that is as an offset against the AMT. That may be more relevant in your situation. But Tiffany, if you'd make sure I get your name and contact, let me hear from you more about the fact pattern. Here's what I think is the good news. Senator Enzi and Senator Roberts are very senior Republicans on the Finance Committee. And Senator Schumer has been a real advocate and partner in this, as well as Senator Stabenow. By working this issue now over 3 years, I think I'm socializing the idea that the R&D credit needs to be accessible and meaningful in exactly your fact pattern, where you're just getting off the ground and where you need the fuel to keep going. Well, I'd love to talk to you more about the details. Lots of small businesses are LLCs, and that is one of the opportunities and challenges of comprehensive tax reform, is that, getting the statutory rates down both for individual filers and for corporate filers is the ultimate objective long term, but there are lots of policy differences over what it does to different types of entities. I hope you're incorporated in Delaware. If you're not, we can resolve that before I leave. Anytime someone says LLC, I'm sorry, it's just an instinct. But let's talk about how R&D tax reform proposals might be more relevant to your situation. And to other folks who've got similar situations who want to share with us. J.J. Singh is my very able economic policy advisor and has done yeoman's work in this area. Could we give him a round of applause? He has been just tireless on this. I was blessed to steal him from OMB, and he's been great at it, so I look forward to working with you on the fact pattern. I think I can take one or two more questions, and then I got to scamper back.
Senator, Dyke Messenger, Power Curbers from North Carolina. First thing I want to say is, wow. Thank you for coming.
Oh, you're welcome.
And what a message. I guess the other is Eric Hu. To have a Democrat come and speak so openly about the issues that are important to us is refreshing, to say the least. I want to put you on the spot, but what about what is your view of OSHA's ambush election rule? NLRB, excuse me.
I was about to say, if it's an OSHA ambush
excuse me,
election rule, I'm insufficiently
I
well informed
got
on that issue.
my policy issues mixed up, excuse me.
Okay. I don't know enough about NLRB's, as you describe it, ambush election rule to give you a meaningful comment. If I understand the implications of what you're talking about, it is revisions to labor election rules by the NLRB that accelerate the timeline for union recognition elections. Is that roughly what you mean? This is one of the areas we're going to disagree. In general, I support the right to organize. In general, I also fought tooth and nail with public sector unions when I was county executive. I think I have a clear-eyed view on the challenges in terms of the balance sheet, in particular of governments, that we can face when unions get to a place in terms of benefits and health care and costs that aren't appropriately taken account of, that can sink a company or a county. But in general, I support the right to organize. I do think that we have had fights over many, many, many years about what counts as a fair election, and I need to be better informed about recent actions by the NLRB on this. I'm not on the HELP committee, but that's not an excuse. At the end of the day, if the NLRB has done something that reasonably defends the opportunity to organize, I'll support it. If there are ways in which it overreaches and it prevents management from also presenting a fair counter argument, I'll take a hard look at it. I hope I answered your question. And I suspect you're not saying, wow, now. Hopefully, though, you're not saying, whoa. Answering the question is my job. Do we have a last question before I go apologize to John for missing breakfast?
Senator Tom Rearwood, Neenah Enterprises in Wisconsin. Quick question on your thoughts on how do we get to a long-term solution on infrastructure, specifically the highway bill coming up?
Yeah, I got to tell you, one of the areas that has been generally of interest to me has been how do we fix our roads and bridges and tunnels and highways, and how do we get trucks moving again, and how do we get our country, anybody who's been to China in the last 10 years looks around and goes, wow, in terms of infrastructure. And nothing puts Americans back to work, and nothing accelerates our growth curve like investing in infrastructure. One of the first bills I looked at and said, okay, well, this one's going to pass, was an infrastructure bank, a financing authority bill that used repatriation of stranded profits overseas to finance a kickstart, to finance investment in infrastructure. I'm a co-sponsor of the Bridge Act. I'm a co-sponsor of several different proposals that are bipartisan, that have been supported by, from NAM and Chamber to the AFL. Why we can't get these done, I really struggle with, because these are bills we ought to get done. This moved from an abstract to a very imminent issue for me in the last 2 weeks. The I-495 bridge that carries 90,000 people a day around Wilmington, Delaware, is closed. By the way, if you didn't know that, it's closed. So take 95, don't take 495. And there are structural supports for a 50-foot high, mile-long bridge that are cracked at the base. Just a painful reminder that we get a D as a country in terms of the scoring by the Civil Engineers Association of the United States on the quality of our infrastructure. You all know this. I will vote to do a variety of things that aren't popular in my caucus, like allowing the repatriation of foreign profits, that is vigorously opposed by some on the left and some on the right. I think we have to find ways to pay for infrastructure. The short-term solutions are not appealing. We've solved it the last couple of years just by direct transfer from the general fund. I think $54 billion over the last couple of years. This is not a solution. A dedicated revenue stream is supposed to sustain what is essential federal infrastructure. And without it, we're not competitive. So this is an area where I was watching the Finance Committee chair and the EPW chair, Senators Wyden and Senator Boxer, work the floor tirelessly the last 2 days. There are Democrats trying to craft a bipartisan compromise on how to finance highway infrastructure. This is exactly the kind of area where your voice will matter a lot. And it is deeply frustrating that we have folks, both wings, who don't want to see a solution. We are running out of room. The Highway Trust Fund goes broke in August. Currently bid and planned major infrastructure contracts will be pulled back, shut down, or shortened. And in states like mine that are relatively small, and in northern states that have a short building construction season, this is big stuff. So if I were to focus on a short list of areas that we ought to be ashamed we can't get something bipartisan done, transportation infrastructure is one of them. I got to leave you on a positive note, forgive me. That's the only way I get on the train every morning. We were on target 2 weeks ago to do something embarrassing. We have a scandal in the VA in terms of the wait times for those who've served our country, not getting access to specialists, not getting access to a primary care in a reasonable timeline. Because there were games being played with scheduling and because there were incentives being offered within the agency. You're all familiar with that. Many of us went and talked to Senator John McCain and to Senator Bernie Sanders because as of the middle of last week, we had a Republican bill the Democrats were going to defeat and a Democrat bill the Republicans were going to defeat in the Senate of the United States. On D-Day, June 6th, John McCain and Bernie Sanders announced a bipartisan compromise bill that is moving fairly quickly. We can still do the things that must be done for our country, but we need your voice to push us to do them. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for a chance to be with you.